Hello, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are having a fantastic day whenever you've decided to click on this video. I am having a pretty good day myself. If you can see the title of this video, I actually just got married this past weekend. It has been a week and a day since I became wed. Now I'm a married woman, which is crazy. I took some time off of YouTube for like a couple of weeks as I was doing the final planning stages and everything for my wedding. That's why I've been gone. My apologies. Honestly, that's probably why I've been gone for these past few months anyway, on top of the depression. It's been wedding planning. Now the wedding has come and gone. It was really great. It was fantastic. I'll talk maybe a little bit more about it in the latter part of this video, but that's where I've been. Super exciting. After 12 years, I am married to my husband. On top of that, yesterday I got my second lobe piercing done, and I have a really fun and exciting hair thing that I'm doing next weekend. So lots of changes, lots of exciting things happening. I'm excited. I'm having a good day. Hope you're having a good day too. I'm so excited that it is sunny outside and that I am sitting in my car doing this wrap up. I read 11 books in the month of April, which is more than I had anticipated myself reading. Let me go ahead and run you through those books, and then I'll talk a little bit more about my wedding at the end of the video. So first up, we have Much Ado About You by Eloisa James. Horse girls, giddy up, because I got a book for you. This story is a kind of loosely inspired Little Women retelling. I don't even know if it's a retelling. I think that Eloisa James was just really inspired by the sister bond between all of the, the Little Women in Louisa May Alcott's story, and this story is very reflective of that with a nice horsey twist. This book mostly centers on our main character, Tess Essex. She's one of the 4 Essex sisters, and their father has recently passed away, and he was a really big horse guy. He had a ton of horses. He gambled a lot based on horses, like horse races and stuff like that. It's like, what else do you gamble on back in the day? He passed away, but he did end up leaving the girls in the care of a duke who was also a little bit horse obsessed. So the 4 girls are kind of trying to navigate British society. They grew up in Scotland, and they're also pretty insistent on the fact that they need to find men. They know that the only way to really be taken care of past adulthood is to marry well and to find themselves a suitable husband. So all 4 of the girls are going to go about this in very different ways, as we find out. But we do have the story again centered on Tess, who ends up falling for a man named Lucius, who is this kind of Raghel Duke, and they fall in love, kind of, I guess. This story was interesting. I wanted to like it more than I did. I loved the sister dynamics between Tess and her other siblings, especially, I want to say, Annabelle. She is kind of a hustler. I kind of appreciate her a lot. She wants a rich man, and I respect it. At least I'm pretty sure it's Annabelle. One of them's named Annabelle. That's the only one I can think of the name of. What didn't really work for me was that there was so much going on and so many characters introduced. I didn't really know until the 50% mark who Tess's intended love interest was, and it wasn't in that kind of love triangle sort of sense. It was more so there are way too many characters in this fucking book. I wanted to become invested in each of the men that was presented to me, but I didn't get very much time with each of them, and I was like, who the fuck is she ending up with anyway? I am excited to read some of the other books in the series because I feel like Tessa's sisters are perhaps a little bit more interesting than her, and hopefully their romances will be based on a little bit more than just banging it out. But this one was just a 3-star read for me. It was fun. I liked the different writing style, especially compared to someone like Tessa Dare, who I also read this month. This is just definitely a more kind of old school traditional type historical romance. Not a lot of humor, but a lot of witty banter at play. So it was a fun read, even though it wasn't an amazing romance. So I gave this book 3 stars. Next up was a book that I put on my most anticipated list of 2022. Really ended up letting me down. It's Made in Manhattan by Lauren Lane. This story is supposed to be a gender swapped modern day take on the My Fair Lady kind of trope or whatever trend story. I don't know. We have Violet, who is the heroine of our story. She is kind of this upper crust New York society type, and she has been working for this old woman for a long time. She has her own billion-dollar company. She's kind of a baddie, and our girl Violet works for her. And one day, rich old lady is like, hey, sorry Violet, I know that you were kind of thinking you might be able to take over this company, but I actually have a secret grandson. I just found him, and I'm gonna need you to make this Louisiana boy up to snuff in the big city, in the Big Apple. So that's Violet's task. She wants to kind of respect the wishes of this woman who's helped raise her, and also fight her growing attraction and hatred at the same time for this man. Conceptually, it's interesting. Conceptually, I was very here for it. I was very interested and intrigued. I just don't feel like the execution was there. This seemed like the kind of story that would make a really, really good movie, and in fact, I feel like there's got to be a movie out there like this, kind of like a She's the Man type of thing. I don't know. A good makeover story, a good rags to riches kind of tale. I don't know. I wasn't invested in the romance of the story. I feel like there was chemistry that was very hot and cold. Sometimes I was like, oh yeah, I want them to bang it out, and then other times I was like, why do these characters even like each other? And ultimately I just felt like the plot coupled with the kind of lackluster characters just made this a romance I couldn't become 100% invested in, which is so sad because this is a story that I was really highly anticipating. It seemed like it was going to be a really fun rom-com to read in the summer, but it let me down. It was whatever. So I gave this book Sadly, 2 stars. The third book I read this month was Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. Now, I didn't rate this book because it's nonfiction and I never rate nonfiction books, but it was a truly, truly excellent nonfiction work. I feel like I knew what to expect going into this book, but it definitely still surprised me. This story is about marginalized voices, especially Black women as they pertain to the feminist movement. It talks about the intersection between discrimination and feminism and how white women often overlook challenges that don't face them as it pertains to their own feminine identity and womanhood. And it was just really good. It was really, really good. I feel like I went into this book expecting that I wouldn't necessarily learn anything new, and while I feel like the overarching message was something that I kind of understood already, there were so many like minute details and things that I had never thought about before that I was definitely educated on after reading the story. I feel like the way that it was told especially was really powerful. I liked the anecdotes mixed with the facts and statistics. I feel like it really put things into perspective in a way that felt really real, and it was just great. It was a fantastic book. I definitely recommend this. Very glad that I read it. Next book I read this month was The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I read this book for the first time back in 2018, which is around the time that I started this channel nearly 4 years ago, which is wild to me. I cannot believe I've been doing this for 4 years. But I really, really remember enjoying it the first time around, and I think my enjoyment was actually the exact same this time around. The story is about our main character who is a duke, and he is unfortunately jilted by his bride due to some scarring he has sustained after a, I want to say like war injury or something like that. She's decided she doesn't want to marry him anymore, and while that wouldn't be a super big deal, the duke's fiance ended up commissioning a wedding dress. The wedding dress is complete, and the seamstress is like, yo, you owe me money. Upon seeing this woman for the first time, upon laying his eyes on the seamstress, our duke decides that he's going to marry her, this commoner. And that is the beginning of a beautiful love story, my friends. This story was just so delightful from start to finish. I think what really stands out about this book in particular is that I think it's the first book where Tessa Dare's writing really shines. She loves sticking to a trope, which I think sometimes can feel a little bit stale, but I think specifically in the Girl Meets Duke series, which I think is the name of this one, just such good humor and lightheartedness, which I think is sometimes missing in a historical romance setting. And I just feel like she handles hard topics with a lot of levity, which I appreciate. Our Duke is scarred, and that is handled with a lot of care, but it doesn't make the overall tone of the story bleak and depressing. It isn't about bemoaning the fact that the Duke has been jilted. That definitely is touched upon, but the story is more about the romance between our Duke and our new Duchess, her trying to make him fall in love with her, and him not fighting it very hard. I don't know. There's so many details in this book that I found so charming. I gave it 4 stars. The only thing that really prevented me from giving this 5 stars is I feel like the romances in this series in particular, really fun, are not necessarily ones that I swoon for. Like, I'm really happy that these two have found each other. I think it's a really fun story. It's a book I would not hesitate to recommend, but when I think of my list of book boyfriends and favorite book relationships, this isn't necessarily one of them. It's just a really, really fun story, I think, especially in the summertime or if you've never read a historical romance. But when it comes to like all-time faves, this is not up there. So I know that sounds bad. It sounds very negative. It's not, I promise. It's a 4-star book and I really, really enjoyed it. I moved to the back seat of my car because my camera was overheating on my dash. Let's go ahead and talk about the 5th book that I ended up reading this month, which was another historical romance that I ended up giving 4 stars to, and that is Something Wonderful by Judith McNaught. This is a book that I have a really hard time describing because the plot and the premise is so bizarre, but the romance and the way that it was executed was just so beautiful. There's something about Judith's writing that I just can't get enough of. I feel like it's that old school historical romance writing that really makes you swoon and care for the characters and their relationship, regardless of how bizarre the premise might be. So the story is about our main character, Alexandra, and she, at the start of the story, is kind of, I don't want to say giving Katniss, giving Farah, but she is in charge of her family and their finances. Our heroine's mother is kind of a deadbeat. She ended up falling for this guy who was kind of a dickhead, and while they were married, he didn't really spend very much time with Alexandra's mom. He put her up in the country, and he went about his life in London, having a good time, much to the surprise of Alexandra's mother. Anyway, her father ends up passing away, and after this, Alexandra's mom is even more in despair, even more just like, life, I can't go on without this man, even though he treated me like shit. So Alexandra is in charge of making sure that everybody gets fed. She has a lot on her shoulders at a young age. I think she's like 16 or 17 at the start of the story. After kind of a interesting series and sequences of events, Alexandra ends up saving a man's life, and because of this kind of compromising situation she gets herself into with Jordan, this kind of renowned, jaded, rake hell sort of duke, she ends up having to marry him, and this story is the romance, I guess you could say, between Jordan and Alexandra. And I say romance because at the beginning of the story is very much not romantic. Jordan really finds Alexandra to be a fun person, but he doesn't really want to marry her. He's like, you're young, you're basically a child, like I have no interest in you sexually. That changes pretty quickly, which I thought was a little bizarre. The main romance comes in after Jordan ends up becoming kidnapped. Very old school historical in that regard, but after he ends up coming back many years later, I say many years, I think it's like 2 years later, he finds that Alexandra Alexandra is much changed, and that Alexandra is less naive and much more aware of the way that Jordan treated the people around him before he ended up going missing or kidnapped, whatever. The romance is really interesting. It goes from Jordan having all the power to Alexandra having all the power, and he kind of has to prove himself to her at the latter part of the story. There were a few too many conflicts, I will say, at the end of this book that kind of made the story less enjoyable than it could have been. Like, this really easily could have been a 5-star romance for me, despite some of the weirdness at the beginning and the weirdness at the end. The middle of the story I thought was really fantastic, and I just feel like these two were really well suited to each other. It's so tough when an author does such a good job at crafting the relationship between two people, but the pieces around the romance not going super well, bringing the romance down. I feel like it's usually the other way around for me. Like, romance isn't that great, but the other stuff's great, and so like I'll give it 3 stars. Since the romance was so strong in this one, I gave it 4 stars, though it would have been 5 stars had that sort of like weirdness gone away. I don't know if I can really put into words the weirdness, but if you've read this book, maybe you understand. The next book I read this month was also a historical romance, and I don't think I've said it, but this book and The Duchess Deal I ended up reading for this video series I'm doing that I talked about in my March wrap-up, which is where I'm going to be reading 10 books that y'all recommend in a particular genre, like the most popular books in that genre, and then kind of talk through them, talk through why y'all like them, and also how I feel about y'all's rankings, you know what I mean? Like, is the #1 most popular historical romance, is it deserving of that title? We're gonna find out in that video. But to do that, I wanted to reread some of the books that I'd already read, and, you know, obviously read the books that I hadn't read before. I have read The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn before. I didn't love it anymore this time around, and in fact, after watching the Bridgerton show on Netflix, I think this book definitely is not as good as the show, and I'll tell you why. I didn't realize this was another marriage of convenience novel like that first book, which I think is kind of stale and uninteresting. I mean, if you're going to have that be a trope that you use twice in a series, let's not do them in the first and second book in the series. On top of that, I feel like Kate in this book was not that great. I feel like Kate in the show is a bad bitch. Kate in the book is bland and is way too self-conscious. She talks about how she is a spinster and, you know, she's not gonna get married. She's counting on Edwina to get married instead. And she seems unsure of whether or not this lot in life is something she wants. And I think that's understandable, right? But the way that she's so insecure about her looks and about her personality and whether anyone would be interested in her is really frustrating. It's pretty clear from the beginning that this marriage of convenience is something that our Duke is actually kind of into. Like, he's kind of into her. Why else would he marry this woman, and why else would he speak so highly of her? It was just frustrating to see Kate be so down on herself. She didn't really seem like that in the show, and if she was at all like that, it was nuanced and balanced, and in this story it was just like, Kate, could you please shut the fuck up? Like, this man is throwing his meat at you every 5 seconds. Like, why are you not excited? Why are you not into him? And sure, he might claim, like, you know, I don't want to fall in love with my wife or some bullshit like that. You know he loves you, okay? You know he loves you. It was just frustrating. It was a frustrating experience. I think I ended up rating this book 3 stars. I think that's fair. I don't think this was terrible by any means, but I just feel like the Bridgerton series gets so much hype and so much love, and I'm not trying to like shit on it, but so many people come and ask me, hey, should I read these books? And I have to tell you, like, I think you should just watch the show and pick up a different historical romance series that's going to be more satisfying and more interesting. I will say there's something really addicting about Julia Quinn's writing, and I can totally understand why people love her stories, but I just didn't love this book, and I don't think the series as a whole is that great. The characters are fun, depicted on the big screen, but I just don't think the book series is that great, okay? Okay, I said it. I said my piece. I'll probably talk more about it in that video that I'm doing where I'm reading y'all's favorite historical romances, but let's move on to the 7th book. The next book that I read this month was The Wallflower Wager by Tessa Dare, another historical romance. This was my second time reading this one as well. I think I've read all 3 of the books in this series by Tessa Dare already, and I will say upon second read, this one didn't hold up as well as I thought that it would. I ended up giving this one 4 stars this time around instead of 5 like I did the first time. I think I was just so excited for this book to come out when it did that I ended up rating it so highly just because I had been looking forward to it. It's not everything I wanted it to be and more, right? So this story is about Penny, and I want to say Gabriel is his name. He is a guy from the gutters. She is a spinster sort of duchess. Is she a duchess? I don't know, the daughter of a nobleman or something like that. And she is living in this like really nice part of, I want to say like Mayfair or something like that. And our hero wants to accept the house that he has purchased next to Penny's and then be able to sell it at a profit, which, you know, super exciting. We love a businessman. And Penny ends up finding herself really drawn to him. She wants to fuck his brains out because she's a spinster, and like, you know, who could possibly want a spinster? That's complicated obviously because Penny has a ton of pets, and Gabriel is like, I have to get rid of all of these pets if I want to be able to sell my house next to you. No one wants to live in the city next to a goat. I liked that Penny was so forward. I think that was my initial thoughts reading this book. I really enjoyed the fact that Penny was a heroine who knew what she wanted. She knew that she wanted to bang it out, even though, you know, she wasn't really sure that she wanted to get married or anything like that. She knew that she had these carnal passions towards Gabriel and she was going to act him out, and I appreciate that, especially in a historical romance or in a historical setting where that's not something that is commonly accepted. I liked that Gabriel was down with it and was really into her. And I mean, I liked their relationship. I thought it was cute, but I do think there was maybe less in the way of romantic relationship development in this story than there was in the Duchess deal. There were a lot of cute moments. If you like animals, I think this would be a fun story to pick up because there's a lot of emphasis on animals. But I don't know, I feel like it kind of fell flat for me. My favorite book of the series is the second book. I need to go reread that one. For some reason, this is not one that y'all consider to be one of the best historical romances of all time. I find that a damn shame because, well, the first one and the third one are cute, the second one's the best. So, I don't know, I stand by that. This one was fun, but I do think rating this one as highly as the second one just wasn't really fitting, so I had to adjust my rating to a 4-star. Anyway, it was good, it was fun. Highly recommend it, I guess, still, but it just isn't my favorite historical romance. Next up is a book that, I'll be honest, I didn't pay as close attention to as I probably should have, and that is The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is a middle grade book about our main character, you guessed it, Morgan Crow, who is a cursed child. She gets accused of being the reason that everything bad happens in her town, and she is slated to die, I want to say on her like 12th or 13th birthday, until she is saved by a man who takes her to this sort of like magical place where she is going to compete in trials and use like a magical gift, I guess you could say, to win this magical trial. She just doesn't know what her gift is yet. This was a tough one for me. I feel like the audiobook listening experience was an enjoyable one, but I just don't feel like I was totally invested in the story, which surprises me because I'd heard so many good things about this book. It's the reason I picked it up in the first place, because I'm not normally a middle grade girl, but I was willing to pick this one up because, again, it was so highly rated and recommended. I don't know, it was okay for me. I don't know that I would rate this book as it is right now because I don't remember all of the fine details of the story. I feel like I started tuning out around the 75% mark. I mean, I definitely listened to it, I finished the book, I know what happens, but I feel like I didn't get as immersed as I needed to be in the story. You know what I mean? It's like a magical school-ish setting, and you really need to be immersed in that world to really, I feel like, enjoy the story, and I just didn't really fully get there. I feel like I also, while I felt really bad for Morgan, I just don't feel like I got enough of her character in this book, like really root for her, and some of the side characters I found a little bit like annoying. I guess it's a middle grade book, so I really can't complain too much, but I read this book, I just don't really have a lot to say about it. Next up, okay, I've got a string of like 1, 2, 3 books that I was pretty disappointed in, okay? Let's get into it. Let's get into it. The first one is Her Night with the Duke. I don't have the full title of this book written down for some reason, by Diana Quincy. Here's the picture of it. This is what the title of it is. This did not work for me. The audiobook listening experience was really not that great. I don't know who the narrator of this audiobook was, but I picked up another historical romance audiobook by this same narrator right after, and I was like, I think it might be the narrator that's kind of like impacting my enjoyment of these stories, which sucks because she's talented, just like not my cup of tea. Anyway, this story really didn't work for me. It's about our main character Leela, who is a half Persian, half English woman, and after her older husband ends up passing away, she ends up traveling kind of across the globe and taking accounts or stories, I guess you could say, of her travels and publishing under the name of a man. Her stories have become kind of a sensation, and she's honestly just living her best life now that her husband has passed away. She really had a love for him, but now she's ready to just kind of like live her life until one day she has to travel back to England to be there to meet her stepdaughter's betrothed. Her stepdaughter, I think, is only like a year or two younger than her, just wants her stepmother's approval for this man, and the man that her stepdaughter is like fallen for or like thinks she's gonna marry is a guy that Leela ends up sleeping with on her way to go meet her stepdaughter again. Yeah, scandal. You know, she sleeps with her stepdaughter's intended, who is this kind of like Rahel Duke. I liked the idea of this kind of forbidden story. I like a good forbidden story. You know, it's her stepdaughter, they're not that far apart in age, like they're supposed to be besties, like there's like levels of like toxicity and like, ooh, is this gonna be scandalous? And also like, you know what, is it kind of okay? I don't know. There was just a lot that I didn't like. I felt like the forbidden nature of this relationship was a lot more drawn out than it really needed to be. I think had Leela been really upfront with her stepdaughter about her feelings towards this man, she could have saved herself a lot of heartache and trouble. It's very obvious that her stepdaughter didn't really care about this man. She was just like, ooh, a good prospect, like I should go for this, like this is important, I should do this, like, you know, because it's my duty as a woman back in the day. And on top of that, I just feel like some of the other conflicts in the story were really frustrating. Obviously, Leela is a woman publishing as a man, and so she has to deal with discrimination because of that. That plotline didn't really get resolved in a way that I thought was very well done or interesting. Then we also have the evil stepson who is trying to both seduce his stepmother and then also steal her house, which was just like an added annoyance. I feel like we could have really just stuck to the forbidden nature of the relationship or one of these other plot lines, but instead doing all of them kind of half-assed just didn't work for me, and I really didn't like the Duke. I felt like he had no fucking personality. I feel like Leela deserved way better than this man. Like it was not my cup of tea. I didn't love it, and it was really disappointing because I'd heard good things about this author and her books. But after reading this this one, I just don't know that I'm gonna rush to pick up another Diana Quincy novel in the future, which sounds bad. Like, I don't think she's a terrible author. It's only been one book, but like, I don't know, just the way that everything developed was just not it for me. So, moving on. I only have 4 minutes left on my camera, so let me make this quick before I go and delete more things off of my SD card to be able to film some more. Anyway, Bad Luck Bridesmaid by Allison somebody Greenberg. I know she has a middle name, but I didn't want to put it on here. I've decided that this year is going to be the year that I am much more generous with my ratings. I feel like in the past, especially in 2021, I didn't give out enough one-star ratings, and I feel like I need to bring those back because there are books that are sometimes deserving of a very low rating, and I feel like this book just really earned that 1 star, you know? I really hated this book. And I know that books and their ratings are very personal to begin with, but I think the story was just never going to be something that was going to be relatable or something that I like rooted for. Let me try to describe this book. Let me try to describe it and then you'll maybe understand. This book's about our main character, Zoe, and she has been the bridesmaid in 3 different weddings that have not happened or like not come into fruition, and she thinks she is a bad luck bridesmaid as a result. She thinks that she is doomed and that no one around her can get married because of her, and that she as a result shouldn't be able to marry either because, like, you know, she's bad luck. And she's using this to kind of like bolster her claim that she is a commitment phobe and that she shouldn't be in a long-term relationship, which is kind of challenging because the guy she ends up falling for at the very beginning of the story very much makes it clear from the beginning he wants to marry and he wants to have children. And she's like, probably not. And he's like, could you see it in the future? And she's like, yeah, maybe. And then he proposes and she's like, no. So you strung this man along for a while. He's like 36 at this point. He wants to start a family and you're just stringing this man along. I don't know. I don't buy it. I don't vibe with it. It kind of pissed me off. Just the overall idea that like you're using other people's failed relationships to justify the fact that like you shouldn't be in a committed relationship didn't work for me. And I wanted to be able to overlook that, and I wanted to be able to root for someone who doesn't want to be in kind of a long-term committed relationship. But it was just so hard when Zoe treated the people around her like absolute dog shit. Like, it was really, really frustrating. And this was already going to be a book that wasn't going to work for me because, surprise, I'm in a 12-year committed monogamous relationship. Like, I like that. I root for that. I'm into that. I don't understand being scared of commitment. I mean, I guess conceptually I understand it, but like in a romance, it doesn't really make sense for me. This wasn't a romance either. It's like, even if you are someone who doesn't want the whole like marriage and babies epilogue ending in a romance, I don't think this is going to work for you because there's no fucking romance in it. It just didn't make sense for me. I don't feel like there was a good takeaway or a good lesson. I really hated everything about this book. I really did. The writing initially pulled me in, but it also felt like I was being told a lot of things rather than shown. It felt like a memoir almost. Like, you're telling me what's happening in your life. When are we going to catch up to present day? And we never did. It was just like, here's all the shitty things that are happening. Here's me being a piece of shit to this man who loves me and treats me well. I don't love it. I don't love it. And it sucks because I really wanted to be able to root for someone, again, who doesn't want to be in a long-term relationship. Zoe was so unlikable, it was hard to root for her at all. So, oh my god, we're at the last book. Okay. Between my SD card filling up every 5 seconds and then my camera dying, it's been a journey. It's been a ride, but I'm glad we're here together. I finished Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman this morning, which, spoiler alert, it's actually the first. We're gonna count it as in April. Anyway, well, where to begin with this book? This is a book, it's a dark romance, or it's categorized as a dark romance, and it was highly, highly, highly recommended to me when I was looking for dark romances. I've asked on Instagram, I've asked on YouTube, and everyone seems to reply, this is dark, it's traumatic, but it's such a good romance, you've got to pick it up. So I decided to pick it up on a whim, on my honeymoon, which in hindsight, not the best time to be reading this book. I just didn't end up loving it, which kind of sucks because I had to put myself through a lot to read this book, and I don't feel like it necessarily paid off. So the story is about our 2 main characters, Dean and Cora Bell, who end up getting kidnapped from Cora's sisters and Dean's fiance's birthday dinner or something like that. They end up leaving together because she needs a ride, and they end up getting kidnapped together. And unfortunately, Cora ends up suffering at the hands of this really evil man. He ends up assaulting her repeatedly, and he also forces Dean to assault Cora as well. They are in this captivity for about 22 days, I want to say. They're able to escape when Dean ends up murdering their captor, and then they have to kind of deal with the repercussions of the trauma that they have faced together and figure out how to do life after that. And I wanted to enjoy the story because I feel like sometimes a dark romance can really bring out the nuance in relationship development and the nuance of human emotion, and I was really looking forward to that in the story. Now, the first, I want to say 20% of this book is when they're in captivity, and then they get out pretty quickly, I would say, after that. The scenes are, I would say, semi-graphic. If you're someone who like is wary of picking up this kind of thing, I would say just maybe stay away from it, but you can also read you know, trigger warnings and stuff online and whatever. So we have that first 20% where they are, you know, forced to do these unspeakable things. They end up kind of trauma bonding, and then after they get out, they end up kind of relying on each other to heal. Is really heartbreaking seeing them trying to kind of navigate the real world after they've been in this captivity for, you know, these 22 days, these 3 weeks. But I just don't feel like very much was handled with nuance. There's characters that get introduced simply to act as inspiration to our characters. There's someone that has their own trauma and is basically trying to say like, hey, my trauma was worse than yours, you should be so happy and grateful. And Cora ends up becoming really happy and grateful as a result result of this kind of like feedback, I guess you could say. There is like unnecessary re-traumatizing of the characters, in my opinion. There's like a very will they won't they thing. Obviously there's sort of like a forbidden element because Dean is engaged to Cora's sister, and like how is Cora going to navigate the relationship between herself and Mandy, her sister. I just think there just wasn't enough nuance in here. I don't know that I would call any of the handling of trauma poor in any way, because like I've never been in this situation and I don't know what poor representation of trauma looks like. I just know that for me, I feel like this book was an oversimplification of what the aftermath of a traumatic event would look like, and I just don't feel like the romance here was really that great anyway. It felt like the romance was based on a lot of sex and not a lot of emotional bonding, which I think is what we were supposed to feel between these two characters. You know, they do have this backstory together where they used to like prank each other and hate each other, but there was this kind of like underlying, maybe we do love each other, I don't know. There were definitely attempts made there, but I just don't feel like it ended up working, and the story felt a little bit hollow as a result. So I don't know if I would rate this book 2 or 3 stars. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. I can understand, I guess, why people would enjoy this book, and again, if this is something that's validating to you in any way or is something that you personally feel attached to, I get it, and I'm not trying to invalidate that. Just for me personally, I just didn't love this story. I don't feel like this is a really great romance or a really great dark romance, so I'll leave it at that. What a weird note to end the wrap-up portion of this video on, but those are the 11 books that I read this month. Kind of a mixed bag. I read some really good historicals, I read some not so great books, I read some nonfiction. It was a month. I am in the middle of like 15 different books right now, just trying to find one that sticks. I'm really looking forward to May and my May reading and what that will bring. So let's go ahead and transition into the wedding / what to look forward to portion of this video. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I ended up getting married last weekend to Hayden. If you've been here a while, you probably know who Hayden is. I do some videos here with him, and it was really, really fantastic, and it was really nice to get to kind of like unplug and not worry about YouTube. I actually had not intended to take any sort of like break, I guess you could say, from YouTube. I was gonna post day after the wedding and like, you know, the weeks of my honeymoon, or the week of my honeymoon, I guess, and like have stuff pre-uploaded and filmed, and I just ran out of time and I didn't do it. And frankly, like, I'm actually kind of glad. I got to really just like stay in the moment and have a really, really good time, and the day of was beautiful. The honeymoon was fantastic. It was everything that I really wanted it to be and more. I'll insert a couple of pictures right here. We got some sneak peeks back from the photographer, not all of the pictures, but a couple. I'm happy with how everything felt, how everything turned out. I just thought it was really special. I don't have too much to say about it right now because it's so fresh, but I am planning on doing kind of a Q&A video. I collected some questions, I guess you could say, on Instagram, which I have recorded and I will be answering, and then y'all can leave me comments in this video if you have any about the wedding, and I can hopefully try my best to answer those in that Q&A video. I'm also going to be doing a makeup tutorial because I ended up doing my own makeup for my wedding. That'll be coming pretty soon, so I want to film it before I do the crazy shit to my hair next Saturday, which is so crazy. But again, that Q&A won't be for another, I want to say like 6 weeks or so. I'm waiting until all of my pictures come back, and perhaps my video. I'm not sure if I'm going to share that yet, so I can have like visuals to show you as I'm talking through some of the questions and answers. I did answer some of those questions on Instagram, so if you want to go and check out my highlights, I have both pictures of the wedding and then also some questions answered, but I'm going to answer more of them like en masse in a month or so. So that's the wedding, I guess. Not much to say except for it was really great and I had a really, really great time. I guess I can tell you a little bit about May. I like updating you because I've been gone for a second. May, I am trying something a little different. I'm trying something a little new, and I'm hoping it goes well. I asked y'all on Instagram. I say y'all. I know not everyone follows me on Instagram, but I asked some of my subscribers on Instagram who follow me on Instagram, what do you want to see from me from the next couple of months? Because I feel like before I left, I was feeling a little bit like I want to post all of these like really personal vlog things, or do I want to post list videos that are a little less personal? Like, what do I want to do? I was undecided, and I asked y'all to see kind of what you're looking for, and I got a really good response, and I feel like I know what I want to do now. I want to satisfy the part of me, and hopefully the part of my audience who wants to be more personal and get to know me better, and then the part of my audience and the part of my creative side, I guess, that wants to make these sort of like creative list videos and, you know, out of the box kind of content. So my plan for the month of May is to do a weekly reading vlog every Tuesday, starting not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. Do a weekly reading vlog where I can be more personal and share some of the books that I'm reading that are not for like planned TBR content. And then on Sundays, I'm hoping to post kind of this more traditional content, I guess you see on my channel. These I read 5 videos, list videos, DBBCs, things like that. And I'm hoping that, you know, even split is going to be, you know, good for people who, again, want to come here for me, my personality, and my life, and then other people who just want the idea stuff, less relationship stuff, and more like, you know, what are these bookish ideas, I guess you could say, recommendation videos, things like that. So yeah, I'm gonna experiment with that, see how it goes. If I hate it, I won't do it the next month, but I'm excited to like report back in the end of May, and we can see how it went, and if we liked it, if we collectively enjoyed it. Overall, I'm just excited to be back, honestly. I need to like get back on the horse, you know? as a horse girl does. That's it for me. Like I said, I hope y'all are having a really good day. I am so glad I got to film this for you, even if I had a lot of like technical difficulties trying to get this shit done. But I love y'all so much. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.